From the Outreach Studios at the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences at Penn State, this is Wether World.
Good evening, Pennsylvania and beyond, and welcome to a special edition of Wether World. I'm your host tonight, Rob Leidick. Much of our cast and crew are spending time with their families and friends this holiday season. Speaking of which, we hope you had a great Thanksgiving holiday with your friends and family. In place of a regular show where we give a forecast and go through our signature segments, we wanted to give you the chance and opportunity to get to know us a little bit more. So I went around with a camera crew and talked to each of the cast that you are typically used to seeing here on Wether World and ask them some questions related to their interests in meteorology. We'll start off tonight with what sparked that initial interest.
Young Billy made the neighbors laugh because he liked to watch the water run into the storm drains. He'd go out in his raincoat, his mother would dress him up, and the neighbors would laugh like hell. That's young Billy, watching the rain go into the storm drains. And I liked thunderstorms once I was 5 years old.
My earliest memories are my father was a high school baseball coach. And of course, as a first, second, third grader, you want to get out after school and go hang out with the high school guys. And so I would watch the weather the night before when the dial on the TV was still the old-fashioned dial, going between channels 2, 4, and 11 to get as many weather forecasts so that I could ensure that there would be a baseball game the next day.
So when I was 6 years old in 1999, it was one of my first days of kindergarten, and Hurricane Floyd actually came up the East Coast, and one of my first days of school, got on the bus, went to school, but then we were sent right back home because of a lot of rain, a lot of wind. So school actually got closed for something weather related, and to me that was fascinating. I didn't even know that that was a thing. So that sort of got me on the path to really taking an interest in the weather. And my parents would always laugh at me because I'd clip out the daily section of the weather newspaper and I'd save them all on this giant stack day in and day out. And I really tie it back to that event of having school canceled by a hurricane passing close by. I thought that was the coolest thing.
I grew up in a coastal town, and the storms there were always so interesting. It was a little town called Bayville, New York, located on the north shore of Long Island in western Nassau County. And when I was 10 years old, there was a threat of a hurricane, and it was Hurricane Gloria. And that was right in the early days of the Weather Channel. And I remember my family putting the Weather Channel on and watching John Hope give his forecast and giving us all the latest updates. And that was it for me. I just started drawing my own weather maps and posting them in the house. And then we were actually eventually evacuated. We were fortunate and nothing bad happened in my town, but just that experience, that was the weather bug that bit me.
A lot of meteorologists will say that the thing that got them into the weather, that bug bit them at a very young age. And for me, it was just the fact that growing up as a kid, I used to be terrified of thunderstorms. So I would run to my parents' room when there was a thunderstorm at night. And then eventually, I think it was like third or fourth grade, that translated into well, what causes thunderstorms? And so that's kind of what got me into meteorology. I watched the Weather Channel a lot growing up, and my grandpap is actually a really big weather fanatic, taught me a lot about barometric pressure and things like that, even in elementary school. So that's what really kind of got me into meteorology from an early age and made me want to pursue a career in it.
I would say, a lot of meteorologists have like a big storm, a hurricane or a snowstorm that really lit the fire, and I can't say that, so I'm a little unusual in the meteorology world. My dad had minored in meteorology in college, and he had an old cloud chart that I found around the house when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And I thought the idea that you could look at the sky and figure out maybe what the weather was going to do was really neat. And so I would always be staring at the sky to figure out what the forecast might be. And that was sort of the thing that got me interested in weather forecasting. And I had a general fascination with thunderstorms. I was scared of them, but I was fascinated by them. So whenever the thunderstorms were in the forecast, I paid extra attention. My ears really perked up.
Many of us here on Weather World have an unforgettable storm that really helped spark that interest in meteorology. Many of those storms involve snow, and you'll see many of those occurred during our early years as we were growing up.
I used to go to Cape Cod in the winter to visit my aunt and uncle, and there was a snowstorm out there one year that it's heavy. It was great. It was only on the Cape. I felt really special and lucky to be there. I walked down to the beach, and there was about an 8-foot, 10-foot drop off to the beach. And so I walked over toward the edge of the snowdrift, not realizing it had blown, 6 feet over that, and I just sunk right through and went down the wall 10 feet into the snow. And I thought that was the best thing ever.
I think two storms kind of solidified my interest. The first was Hurricane Agnes. I would go to Grandma's every summer to spend a week. Well, the week of 1972 at Grandma's was the week of Hurricane Agnes. So all the outdoor activities were canceled. I actually stayed 3 extra days because the bridges across the Ohio River so that I could get home from Pittsburgh to Steubenville, Ohio, were closed because the water levels were too high. Then when I was in high school, it would have been January of 1978. Ferocious blizzard roared through Ohio. It's now known as the Cleveland Super Bomb. All kinds of snow, all kinds of cold air came in behind it. School was canceled for many, many days. And I think that sealed the deal.
So the President's Day storm in 2003, that snowstorm sticks out vividly in my mind for several reasons. One, even though I was tall, even at a young age, that was the first snowstorm that I physically can remember snowdrifts being taller than me. So going out playing in the snow, I would get lost in the snow piles because some of the drifts were 3, 4, 5 feet tall. And I also remember that storm sticking out in my head because at that time I was in tune with weather forecasts, and we were only expected to get a few inches of snow. And then we woke up with over 2 feet on the ground.
I grew up, there was not a lot of big snowstorms in Northwest Ohio. I did visit my grandmother one time it was November '96 near Cleveland, and they get some lake effect snow. She doesn't live in an area where there was a lot of lake effect snow typically, but in this one instance, they got about 18 inches in 12 hours. I had never seen snow like that for any period of time, and there was thunder snow. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, seeing the sky just light up, thinking it was more lightning, but it was actually power lines arcing. They were down in the street because trees had fallen. That was really quite a storm because the more classic lake effect areas of Northeast Ohio, the primary snow belts got like 60 inches of snow over 4 or 5 days. So it was a really remarkable event, and I thought it was pretty neat that I got to at least see part of it.
There weren't any notable storms growing up that I can really recall off the top of my head, but I always remember those days where we had tornadoes that were a potential. So tornado watches or warnings. I was always talking with my grandpa, and there were a couple storms where I remember the family had to go into the basement. And so those were very vivid.
Thanksgiving 1989, by far the best Thanksgiving ever, and it was because of snow. We were hosting Thanksgiving that year. My mom's brother and sister came over with their kids, and we were all old enough at that point that we were allowed to go sledding without any adults. And we went with a group of neighbors, and we just had the best day sledding, and then we came home to just an incredible meal. So it was just a really fun day.
I think I speak for the rest of the cast and crew here on Weather World when I say that we are self-proclaimed weather weenies. There's nothing like geeking out in the Weather Center in the Walker Building here at Penn State's University Park campus with the other students and faculty over a storm. And many of those storms have occurred either in the Weather Center or while we're out in the field.
The first one that comes to mind, March 1993. I was on the faculty at the Beaver campus in western Pennsylvania, but I would occasionally drive to State College to do Weather World. Well, I was on the Thursday and Friday before the March 1993 superstorm. And I remember starting to drive back to Pittsburgh, and it was just starting to snow. Got back home, the in-laws were visiting. They got stuck for 2 days, couldn't get home. So, and of course, Penn State had canceled classes as part of that. So that one I'll never forget.
Not necessarily just one storm, but the 2017 hurricane season and the successive barrage of big storms, Harvey, Irma, Maria, and to some extent even Jose before anybody knew what was going to happen with it. Being surrounded by all these people that are interested in the weather, we have all the computers, all the technology here, but really what stuck out to me recently is last year's hurricane barrage. We always say some of the worst storms produce some of the best imagery and eye candy to look at as far as satellite images and radar images, which we have the power to see here, but they are also some of the worst storms in the history of the country. But certainly being here and around a lot of colleagues for that barrage of storms was quite memorable.
So before coming back to Penn State, in fact, right after I graduated, I went to Bangor, Maine, and had the chance to work a lot of awesome snowstorms. There was a blizzard that I covered. It was February 8th of 2013. I won't forget that storm because I was outside reporting in this snow squall that was going through. We had winds that were reported 70 miles per hour at the airport in Bangor. I'm outside doing these live shots. The snow is up past my knees. My car got completely buried under a snowdrift of 5-6 feet of snow. Temperatures were only in the teens, so it was that snow that really blew around, so visibility was near zero. I'll never forget that storm and covering it, getting the snow reports coming in. And it happened to be on a weekend, so it didn't really cripple the infrastructure. Schools weren't canceled or anything like that, but it was a team effort, and I actually stayed at the station all night long and slept on a couch, I think, in the newsroom.
We've had, in 30 years, there have been an awful lot of storms that have made people in the department congregate in the weather center looking out the windows. Usually it's thunderstorms. They're most visually exciting, and they're coming in from the west usually, and we get a great view of them. And then when, on the occasion when hail hits the window, we're all very excited. Oh, there's hail, and that's riveting.
I don't have a particular storm in mind. Whenever we have a thunderstorm that's rolling into State College or a snow squall, everybody is just glued to radar scope on their phones, and then everybody heads to the windows in the weather station because we have a great view of any storms that are coming in from the west. And it's really funny to see people coming up from other floors, and everybody just is pressed against the window. And it's really fun to see the spirit of, the weather nerd coming out in everybody at one time.
All my courses are online. My students geek out virtually via discussion forum or sometimes chat, video chat, things like that. So I get to witness meteorologists sort of geeking out online and maybe not in person in a weather station.
We hope you enjoyed this special edition of Weather World tonight, getting to know us a little bit more and what drives our passions in meteorology, something we bring to the show, we hope you feel, at least every night. We'll be back with a regular program here starting on Monday, looking at the first day of deer season, wrapping up the month of November next week, and eventually looking ahead to the first day of meteorological winter, and that begins on December 1st. We hope you have a great weekend with your family. For now, I've been your host tonight, Rob Leidick. We'll see you next week.